Our next guest is a guy who I've gotten to know over the years. Scott Rasmussen is an American political analyst, digital media entrepreneur. He's the author of The Sun is Still Rising. Politics has failed, but America will not. And he joins us here on WSBA. Good morning, Scott. How are you? Good to talk to you again.
Good to talk with you. It's the crazy season, though.
Oh, my goodness. I mean, I've never seen crazier. Obviously, election time is always a kind of a nutty time, but with COVID and everything else that's going on now, and we got mail-in ballots and all the different things, it's nuts. And that's exactly what I wanted to talk to you about this morning. You wrote an article the other day, and I read it, and I had to give you a call and see if we could get you on. The fate of America will not be decided on November 3rd. Almost all positive change in America begins from far from official Washington and outside of the political process. And an article you wrote, you apparently made a lot of people a little bit angry last week when you kind of said some things about, America's not going to be decided on November 3rd, that all things go a little bit beyond the political process. And it seems to me anymore, Scott, that many people think that politics has seeped into everything. And we kind of run to Oz, our political leaders, for answers all the time. And I was struck by a quote that I use regularly by Groucho Marx, which you'll find interesting. Politics is the art of looking for trouble, finding it everywhere, diagnosing it incorrectly, and applying the wrong remedies. Groucho Marx with that famous quote. So politics is maybe not where we go all the time. Maybe the culture is really what we should be looking at right now. Your thoughts on that in the article that you wrote the other day?
Well, first off, I have to chuckle when you talked about your reference to Oz, because I used to explain it that people, are looking for the Wizards of Washington to behave like the Wizard of Oz.
Yeah.
And in fact, Dorothy found the answer because there was no place like home. She had to work on, getting back home on herself, and the culture and all kinds of other things were really what was important. 2 weeks ago, I wrote a column basically saying that America will be okay no matter what happens in this election. And it just seemed to really tick people off. So I polled, because that's what I do, and I wanted to find out what people thought about this and other things, and wrote a follow-up in which I found that some people, they tended to agree with some of my perspective. 69% said, politicians aren't nearly as important as they think they are. 76% said, agreed with the idea that American society is not as polarized as American politics. And 57%, 6 out of 10, said, the culture leads, politicians lag behind. And these views were shared across all aspects of the political spectrum. So that made sense to me. It's the story of America. We look to change from the culture, and politicians eventually catch up. But no matter how much I wrote about that and found that only 31% agree with me, that America will be okay either way.
It was interesting, and I looked at that the culture leads, and one of the points that jumped out at me was that most people are not as polarized, except for politics. That seems to be the only one place that we are really far apart, and on a lot of other issues, we're not. Although, when you add the COVID factor in right now about do we wear a mask, do we not wear a mask, do we social distance, do we not social distance, you get some difference of opinion. I don't know what the polling says on that right now, but that certainly has added another dimension into this whole thing, because that has also become politicized.
It sure has. And on that, like most things, politics heightens the polarization. Republicans see one thing, Democrats see another. What the polling actually shows is there are people at both extremes. A small group who believes that this whole thing is a hoax, and who were being, our liberties are being compromised for no reason whatsoever. There's a small group at the other end that thinks, it should be all masks all the time, all places, national law, deal with it. Most Americans, about 85%, say they wear a mask, but their attitude is a little more relaxed than the Democrats would like, and a little more conciliatory than some Republicans would like. Some wear them because it makes other people feel better. Some wear them when they walk through a crowded room, but as soon as they get to their table at a restaurant, they come off. And so there's this sense that the political process does heighten the polarization on just about everything. But the other part, and I mentioned it very briefly in the column, is this idea that change does begin outside the political process. I mean, the women's suffrage movement, women have the right to vote today, not because congressional people got together and thought this through, It began in Wyoming in 1869. The simple fact was there were 6 guys for every girl in Wyoming, and they thought, we got to get some women out here. We need to offer them some marketing incentives to come to Wyoming. And they were so blatant about it that some of the suffragettes didn't want them to give women the right to vote because their motives weren't pure. It took 50 years of things outside of Washington, women gaining the right to vote in state after state, and sometimes it had to do with a battle over prohibition or something else. By the time Congress got around to acting and giving women the right to vote, there were 2 significant factors. One, there was already a woman in Congress, and 2, almost all members, or more than half of the members of Congress, were already being elected with the votes of women.
Yeah, the idea that you point out in your article is that positive change starts far from official Washington. I think it gets exacerbated. The problems get exacerbated. And as Groucho Marx said, we apply the wrong solutions so many times.
Yep.
But you look at the civil rights movement, for example. How hard did Martin Luther King and all the various people who stood up in the South for civil rights, how hard did they have to work to get, for example, President Kennedy at that time to come on board because of political considerations and other things that happened too? They went to Washington. They had the March on Washington. TV was out there looking at, what was happening at the Edmund Pettus Bridge. And all of a sudden, it all came from the people and from what was seen there, not from Washington, not from the political standpoint, but from a real standpoint with people seeing an injustice in America.
That's right. And, by the time Congress passed the Civil Rights Act, it was 17 years after Jackie Robinson broke the Major League Baseball color barrier. And public support for the measure was by a 2-to-1 margin. But, there's something in that we tend to forget in today's world. The rights movement's great gifts to America was the way they protested. They didn't go – they were clearly being African Americans in the South, clearly being mistreated legally
Absolutely.
And by every aspect of government. And yet they realized they had to behave in a manner that highlighted the injustice. They didn't want to fight back. And the nonviolent nature of that movement was something that people on both sides need to remember today. If you want to convince somebody on the other side that you are right, you don't get there by screaming at them. You let them see it for themselves. You stand up for what you believe in and then move on. We're
Scott Rasmussen this morning, who is a pollster, a columnist, a guy who comments on things regularly. He's an American entrepreneur, author of The Sun Is Also Rising, and just a great guy. The sun is still rising, I guess it is. But welcome back, Scott. Everyone wants to know, what poll should we look at now in the country? I was talking to my friend Charlie Giroux yesterday. He said he'd be listening today on this, and he said, I got to hear what Scott has to say. But, you do some polling and so forth, and everyone wants to know what the election results are going to be. Obviously, no one knows that right now. And the final day to vote, we used to say the day to vote was Tuesday, November 3rd. Now the final day to vote is Tuesday, November 3rd, or to get its postmark. So what's your take right now in this election? What are the issues that are the make or break issues coming down the stretch here? And what's your look at the whole thing?
Well, first off, the polls you should look at are the averages. Don't just pick out the polls you like or don't like. And you should recognize that all the polls are face challenges. I've been releasing battleground state polls. I actually have something on Pennsylvania coming out later today, and all of these numbers I'm releasing have 3 different turnout models. The baseline model that is my best estimate, but also what does it look like if turnout is a little bit stronger or a little bit weaker for one party or the other. Mm-hmm. And the reason I'm doing that is because the last time we had a pandemic was 1918. There was no polling industry. We don't have a model for this.
Right.
And what tell me, my national polling right now shows that Joe Biden is up by 7 points. That's as of last weekend. But if there's a strong Republican turnout, it can pull to a 4-point race. And, that's close enough for a surprise. The difference gets to be people who are going to vote in person on Election Day are very heavily pro-Trump. Mm-hmm. People who are voting early in person are modestly pro-Biden. But the number of people who are voting by mail, they are overwhelmingly pro-Biden. And the question is going to be, how many of them will show up? If you miss your estimate of how many people vote by mail, how many millennials will actually get to the Postal Service and put their ballot in the mail, if you miss by a little bit on that, it has a big impact on the margin.
It's really interesting, and a lot of people have said anymore, we don't trust polls. And as you said, I look at the Real Clear Politics average every day as kind of the best guesstimate. But people are saying people lie to the polls anymore. And we're asked about polls. I got like 3 requests last week, so people lie to the polls. So we don't know exactly what's going on here. How do you kind of deal with that as a guy who does some poll work?
Well, look, I think people lying to the polls is greatly over-exaggerated.
Okay.
But I do think there are turnout challenges. You have to make sure if you just do a poll and you don't put a lot of effort into it, you get too many people with a college degree, too many people with a postgraduate degree, too many women, too many people left of center. That's just the people who are more likely to answer a poll. So you have to reach out to people without a college degree. You have to reach out to minorities. You have to reach out to different segments of the population and include them in your poll. And then you have to estimate, what is a turnout going to look like? And that is the big challenge. The way I look at this race this year, based on my polling and whatever I'm seeing in the Real Clear Politics average and the other places, is there's a range of potential outcomes. The best outcome for the Democrats is Joe Biden wins a fairly comfortable victory. He wins Florida, and election night is declared over. We don't have an ongoing strain. The mid-range is Joe Biden wins a narrower victory, and there's a lot of nail-biting. The best outcome for Republicans and conservatives is that President Trump closes the gap by a point or two. We end up in a situation just like we did 4 years ago. And Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin will decide the vote. The difference is we won't then know the outcome for 3 or 4 weeks because of the mail-in votes and all the legal battles that will be fought. And it's important to recognize, again, this is the best-case scenario for Republicans. If they win a narrow victory in that manner, it also means that we won't know who controls the Senate for 3 or 4 weeks.
Right.
It means we won't know who controls state legislatures. There will be a lot of chaos and confusion, and neither side will trust the result.
It's going to be an amazing finish here. Scott, thanks for taking us inside the polling thinking this morning. And I hope people check out that great article, The Fate of America Will Not Be Decided on November 3rd. You can actually go to Deseret.com, Deseret.com to find that. And always appreciate you being on, my friend. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Have a great day.
Take care. Scott Rasmussen with us here on WSBA Morning News with Gary Sutton.